Hello and welcome to week 4 of Level 3, Unit 302, the Communication Unit. And this last week, you're not really learning anything new, but we are thinking about how to do presentations because it's an important communication skill and because it's required as part of your assignment. So I'm going to talk through some of the sort of do's and don'ts of actually creating and presenting a presentation. And then in the second half, I'm just going to talk through the assignment itself as required. Now, as I said, this is part of your assignment because it's a communication unit. They particularly would like you to do a presentation. And in task 2, we'll be revisiting this later. 2.2, criteria 2.2 asks you to produce and deliver an oral presentation to an audience at the appropriate level. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a PowerPoint with a set of slides. I have a topic and I'll give that to you a bit later on as well. But let's just get this sort of into your mind. You're going to create a PowerPoint and then you're going to record an audio as I do with this video. And that's basically, you'll see it when you're in PowerPoint, if you go into slideshow. So once you've created your PowerPoint slides, when you go into slideshow, you click up and have a look and it says record the slideshow. And this is when you can do the recording and it looks like my recording here. So you'll come up on a little quarter in the corner. You do your recording and then you save it. Good idea, I think. And then you can send it on to me. Okay. So although you're doing a presentation, this is basically a head and shoulders presentation, as you can see, but there's no reason for you not to be reasonably animated and to sort of give me some eye contact through the camera, things like that. Okay. So it means that I need to hear you speak over your PowerPoint. Okay. So we'll talk about different aspects of it as we go on. So that's the idea anyway. As I said, I'll give you a bit more details when I talk through the assignment. So let's think about preparing a presentation. So why would we use presentations in care? So imagine you work in a care home. Why would you be doing a presentation? Why would anybody on the team be doing a presentation? Maybe give that a moment's thought. You might want to jot down some ideas that you might have before I go on. Okay, so I'll give you a moment to do that. So we can do it if we're doing some education, if we're doing some in-house training, if a team leader or a supervisor might be doing something for the more junior staff, or you might be asked to do something as part of a project group and then showing it to the rest of your team. You might have to do it for a job interview. As you progress in care, especially if you're starting to look at supervisory roles or team leader roles, then very often they're expected to do presentations as part of the job interview. We may be presenting ideas to senior management. As a team, you may have decided that you want to look at a different way of doing things in the care home. And you might have to present that to the senior management to get them to approve it. And you might be part of the project team that's been asked to actually do the presentation. And also marketing. Very often now, care homes can be a competitive business. And if you go to any of the sort of care exhibitions, where some of the bigger care homes are, you'll see that they have all sorts of marketing on display, including creating videos about their service, maybe doing some presentations, maybe doing some talks to get people interested in them as an organization. They may put some bits up on YouTube, things like that, using social media. So all sorts of different ways, really. So when you're doing presentations, it's not so much what you say, and it's sometimes it's the way you say it. So we know that the way we behave, the way we present ourselves can affect how people perceive us and can help them form sort of attitudes and opinions about us. So let's think about what the impact of communication might be. So you might want to give that some thought before you move on. What's the impact, do you think, of the way you communicate, how you do it? Your verbal communication, your non-verbal communication. Remember, it's all one package. Have a little think about it. Let's see what the outcome is. So what you say, the content of what you say is 30% of your communication impact. So the actual words that come out of your mouth. What they see, and this is often your PowerPoint, your presentation, your pictures, your graphs, the little graphics that you might use, 40% of the impact. So remember, the visuals can have a slightly higher impact than the actual words that come out of your mouth. So if you just sort of tell me, you're actually going to be telling me about an illness, if you're just telling me it and you haven't got any nice graphics or nice charts or graphs to go with it, I will remember less of what you've said, which means that your mark might not be as high because it hasn't stuck with me. And one of the biggest things that we can do, which has a 70% impact, though we won't be able to do it here, is if you use models and products and tools. So if people can actually, take the thing that you're selling, say, handle it, play with it, do things, see how it works, take it apart, which is why some exhibitions, they might have pieces of equipment for you to handle and work and see how it works. Because really, trying things out like that is one of the biggest impacts of all. Naturally, of course, it doesn't work for all presentations. It's great if you're presenting a new piece of equipment for the care home, but not if you want to talk about, the quality of your care and, how good your care planning is and, what standard of training you've got. There's nothing, you can't really show them some of that really. You can show them maybe some equipment that you use, but apart from that, it would be difficult. But do remember that handling things like that has 70% impact. So when it comes to using your PowerPoint, your pictures, your graphs, the way you've laid it out has a slightly higher impact than when I'm just babbling like I do. Okay. Which is why sometimes it's good to let your slide speak for itself and then say something a little bit different. Okay, so using that again, you've got verbal language. How much is verbal? How much is speech? And how much is visual language? Which do you think matters the most? Again, what sort of percentage do you think that has the effect? I'm giving you a moment. You jot down some ideas. Got to add up to 100. Okay. Verbal language. So the actual words that we choose, the meaning of our words, how appropriate they are. Secondly, speech, the sound, the tone, the way we articulate, how we vary our speech. How important is that? And then this classic non-verbal, the gestures, the movements, our facial expressions, the way we stand. Like this. How different is that? Have a little guess. Give some ideas. Give you a moment. Jot down what you think it could be in percentages. Think about the last slide. If you want to think on it a bit longer, you can always stop, pause before we go on, and then have a little bit of think of it yourself, and then release the pause and off you go. So there you go. Your visual body language is 50% of your communication. the way you say something, how you sound, is 40% of your communication, and those words are only 10% of it. So remember that as well. So when you're doing a presentation, it's not just about the stuff you say. If you say it all in a very dull monotone voice and you just read it out, the words we choose and how we put our words together to create meaning and the appropriateness of our words, people are not going to remember it. People might even miss it. They certainly would find it difficult to take notes. So remember thinking about your tone, changing your tone. Your volume needs to be natural, though. We don't need to be screamed at. Yeah. Just how you vary what you're saying, where you put some emphasis on things you want people to know and remember, where you skip on because it's not that important, and where you go a little slower because you know that it's got a detail that you want people to understand. Those sorts of things. So bear that in mind when you're doing the voiceovers for your PPT. Okay, gestures and movements. As I said, normally if you're standing up in front of people, there's quite a lot of body language to take account. Remember that we don't want our hands folded because that looks grumpy. Think about the way you stand. Don't stand aggressively. Don't stand as if you're telling people off. Think of those. Think of the facial expressions: welcoming, smiling, happy, interested. Those sorts of things. But you're only going to be doing head and shoulders like I am here. So remember, you have to do as much with your head and shoulders as you can, because you haven't got the rest of your body to help you out. So what we say, less is best. You don't need to say blah, 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 lots and lots of, because people really, tons of paragraphs of speech, people won't retain, okay? You need to use the highlights on your PPT like I have here, and then fill in the gaps, okay? Use colourful language. Try to give examples. You can give personal examples. They can be interesting. And describe things a bit better so that people have a bit of a wider idea of what you're saying. So you're going to be talking about an illness. When you're talking about the signs and symptoms, give me a bit of detail on that. Give me a bit of description there so I know what you're talking about. Use pauses effectively. Stop, take a breath. You're going to have 5 minutes, which is actually quite a long time to do a few slides. So make sure you pause in between. Again, if you do everything really quick and you don't take a breath and you rattle it off, then I will never be able to follow what you've said, and I might miss it, and I might end up marking you down on your knowledge. Okay, so things like that. So know your audience, know who you're speaking to. You're only speaking to a couple of other students and me. So those of you who know me know that you can just focus on what you think I need to know. Run a sensitivity check, and that's if thinking about the language that you use. Are you using what's appropriate language? Do some of the words that you're using, do you think they could be offensive to someone? If you're not sure, check it out with someone. Check it out with a friend, check it out with a colleague, check it out with somebody at work. Is this okay to say this if you're not sure? Or look it up. And avoid jargon. Remember, we've talked very often about jargon and how it's not good communication, because if people don't use the same jargon as you, they can misconstrue. So think about when you're talking to your service users. You're going to be working in care homes in a different country to me. You may have some jargon and slang in your care home that you say about certain things that we would never use in the UK. We may have totally different words. So the best way to make sure that I understand what you're saying is to avoid the jargon completely. Okay. You need to be effective and you need to sound professional. So you need to have practiced it a little bit. So not to be hit and miss, not to get confused in the middle of it, 'cause it doesn't sound very professional. And I will mark you down for that, because there's no real reason why you can't practice it beforehand. Now, when you're doing your voiceovers, you might want to do it a couple of times, because you can over record them if you want. But what I would say is, practice the sort of things that you're going to say. Make yourself some notes for what you're going to say before you actually just go ahead and record. But you can record over, so it's not a problem. If you listen to it back and you think, oh, that slide was really not good, then record over it. It's fine. Okay. Don't send it to me until you think you're happy with it and you've done it as many times as you want. The material needs to be solid and convincing. It needs to have good ground. So again, be careful where you get it from. Please don't get it from Wikipedia, because that's not solid. It needs to be valid information. So it needs to be from, a professional capacity, or a technical textbook, or a good piece of research, or something like that. It needs to be real. So especially if you're using statistics, trying to get the most recent ones you can, always helpful. And look, give a little bit of thought to yourself. How do people perceive you? How do you come over? Do you come over as aggressive? Do you someone who talks too much when they don't need to? Are you a big picture person that just gives an outline but doesn't give any detail? Can you come across professionally, and you come across someone who's a bit nervous and timid and frightened? Are you introvert or extrovert? um, think about it, because it will come through on your presentation. So what you need to do, if you feel that you're a bit shy in some areas, think about, okay, what can I do to get over it? Remember, you're just recording this with your laptop, so no one else is going to watch you actually doing the recording process. And probably it'll only be me and the IV, whoever sees this, really, unless you want to share it with friends and family. It's up to you, really. So you can be aware it's not actually going out to a bigger audience. When we used to do these with face-to-face classes, you would have to do your presentation to all of the students in your group. And in some groups, that could be 10 or 20 people. You are not having to do that. You are pretty much it's just you and your laptop. And as I said, you won't be there when I watch it anyway. So, I would just go for it, really. Okay. If you know yourself and know where your weaknesses are, then again, um, have a little think with yourself. How can I overcome this, and prepare it? I've put in some bits here about as if you were doing a full-on presentation to a group, which you're not doing now, because this course has gone online. But it's important to be aware of it. Are the group hostile, friendly, or neutral? That really affects. You need to know that beforehand, because it really affects about how you're going to prepare yourself, and what you're going to get ready for, and what you might need to have in your sort of back pocket ready for it. You might have an idea about how favourable that they'd be towards your point of view, or are you coming in with something sort of really new and radical and different? And because you're going to have to think about how you approach that. That's not particularly the issue for this presentation, because I'm asking you to tell me about you. You're going to choose an illness, and you're just going to tell me about it, really. So that information sort of that you'll be finding has been in existence for quite a while, so it's not really up for discussion. But it's just things to think about with the audience. How willing are they to accept new ideas? Obviously, if you find any new research about the illness, you'll get extra points for that. If you can bring me in something that I've not already heard of, that's new or happened just in the last couple of years, that would be really good. So eye contact. Normally, again, if you were doing this live, you'd be very aware of your eye contact. You'd be needing to look around individual members of your audience, showing them that you're connecting with them. If you think about the things we said about when you're sitting down working with your service user, how really, really important eye contact is, and how you're having that two-way connection. You still do it, even if you're doing it to an audience of 200. What you do is you'll pick out different people. Even big rock stars actually do look at people generally in the front row because that's all they can see. And they do focus on them as they move around. And that's why when you see the videos, you see some sort of interaction on their faces because they are looking at random members of the audience. You need to do that as well. You don't just keep looking one way and you just don't stare straight into it as if you're only talking to one person. I know you will only be talking to me, but really, I'd like you to see you maybe move your head around a bit as if you were talking to an audience. Okay. So make each person in an audience of 20 believe that that presentation involves them personally. Okay. 2 to 3 seconds of sincere, natural, and sustained eye contact. Just watch Bruce Springsteen on stage if you want to see how that works. He can do it with 70,000 people. You can do this. Okay. Body language. Think about your facial expressions. What are they saying? Don't scowl, don't grimace. A simple smile, not too much like the Joker, not a crazy smile. Just a comfortable, gentle smile that comes now and then. It's hard to watch someone who looks terrified and their whole face shows it. You don't need to be that frightened because I keep reminding you, it's just you and your laptop here doing this recording. So should be fine, really. But do think about your facial expressions. If you do think you've got some funny expressions that you sort of wish you didn't do, well, maybe practice so that you try not to use them. Okay. And, try to look like you're happy doing it as well and that you're comfortable doing it. Again, it's a sign of being professional that you don't sort of show your emotions too much, but just show that you're happy and comfortable. You're going to be imparting information to me, and hopefully you've done a bit of research about the topic that I give you. So do try and show that it's something that you might be a bit interested in. Well, because you will get marks for your presentation, and that will include your verbal and your non-verbal. So if I think you look bored and disinterested, I will mark you down. Posture and movement, not such a big issue here, but convey a conversational attitude to put people at ease. You need to be fairly professional and comfortable. If you were doing it again in front of people, you'd need to stand up straight. You need to keep your head up so you could look around comfortably. You can move around. It's perfectly acceptable to move around, but you do it with a bit of purpose. A few steps, you might move to this corner of the stage. You might move towards the centre. You might move back, and then you might move over there, so that people, it keeps them conscious when you're moving around a bit. But if you pace up and down, that they'll think that you're showing signs of anxiety. So you need to be a bit careful with that. There is a question about sitting down. I don't think it works with very large groups personally. I think people feel more confident standing up. If it's a huge group, people often like to stand behind a lectern or something like that where they can sort of hide their shaky knees. If you were doing a small seminar group, you could sit. I think it would be fine. For this, of course, you will be sitting because you'll be talking again into your laptop. But you need to sort of sit in a comfortable way, upright with your shoulders back, really, looking directly at me again. You don't really want to see somebody doing this and being off to. Remember that you're just going to disappear out the corner of the picture. And so if you sit there like that and do a presentation, I won't know what you're on about. Okay, voice. Try to keep your voice relaxed. Try not to keep it too stressed. Please breathe. Otherwise, you'll go blue in the face and fall over. If you can't relax, if there's something about what you're saying that maybe you've struggled with a bit, even though you've practiced it, then just move on quickly to the next point. Don't just do everything without breathing. I mean, you definitely have to breathe between the slides. You may well breathe as you go down. If you don't, then you will run out of air, and then you will get panicky, and then it will sound really strange, and then you have to take a big deep breath in the middle of what you're saying. Even though you're just online, project your voice. Not make myself cough now. Don't be too mousy. Don't sort of speak down to your chest, but try to be calm, professional, and project yourself. Okay. All of this will gain you marks. Think of the quality. Think of the rate of speaking. Think about whether you could follow it. When you listen back, think, am I speaking so fast? Because we often speak faster with a bit of nerve. Am I speaking so fast I can't follow it? Then I need to slow this slide down a bit. Think about the volume again, not too loud because it sounds like you're shouting, and not too quiet. I'll be straining to listen because I'll mark that down as well if it makes me tired. Um, Inflection, think about the way you say words. If there's a word that you struggle with, practice it a few times until you're more comfortable with it. If you're really struggling with it, change it. Have a look online, change it for an easier word for you to say, rather than have something that gives you anxiety. Think about how you articulate. Make sure you are nice and clear, because although this does record quite well, sometimes it doesn't pick up the little things. So, try to make sure that you're very clear with your speaking voice. Slide tips. Use a slide master to create a nice design. A lot of you are very good at PowerPoints, probably better than me, because you've often done it at school and that. But just make sure you do things. So keep a constant design. If you keep changing the background, it looks a bit childish and it looks a bit messy. You can vary the content. You can either have bullet lists, or you can have a paragraph like this. You can have some text and image. But as I said, keep the background consistent. In fact, if you do everything with just bullet points, that gets a bit dull as well. So it's quite nice to mix it up a bit. Every now and then, give me something a bit more to read, like this. Or make sure you put a couple of images in, some graphs or some clip art, or that, just to give me something to focus on as well. Limit the number of words on each screen. Not too much to read, because everybody reads at different speeds. It's not too bad here because I'm in control of the slideshow as I watch it back. But if you were doing a public one and you were just clicking along, you have to go at a certain pace, really, because you couldn't go to, say you had 200 people, you can't say, has everybody read that slide? Right, I'll move on, so you can't do it. Use some key phrases that may get repeated. So if it's a piece of information that's really important, you might bring that key phrase in a couple of times. And only include essential information on the slides. The detail comes out of your mouth, so you fill out the slides. So don't write everything on the slide. So I just read it, because if I'm just trying to read a lot on the slide, I won't be listening to you. And part of the mark is about how you do as well. Limit punctuation. You don't really, and although it's unusual, you don't need to put as many full stops and things on a PPT as you would do if you were writing it. Don't put lots of capitals, because again, it looks like shouting and people find it harsh. A little bit of empty space will make it easier to read, some line space between paragraphs and things like that. Contrasting colours for text and background. They always say light text on a dark background is best, particularly for people who've got dyslexia and that. So like things like yellow text or white text on a blue background is quite popular. Strangely for me, that doesn't really work very well. I like very light backgrounds with a darker text. It's just a personal thing. But anyway, you do what you feel comfortable with. As long as I can read it clearly, I'm okay. But that's just a bit of a clue, that if you're doing a PowerPoint, for me, I prefer light text. I prefer darker text on a lighter background, as you can see here, because it's just I read better that way. It's just, maybe it's to do with whatever eyesight issues I have. I don't know. Avoid the use of flashy transitions such as flying things in, floating things off. You can do a little bit now and then, but if you're just doing tons and tons of it, it gets very distracting, and people get a bit fed up with it. And you just, in the end, you're just seeing things flying around and you're not taking in what you've said. I'd have to go back, and if I have to go back and keep looking at things to see whether I've understood what you're saying, and I will mark you down for that because it's not a good enough presentation. This is a professional presentation and it's a level 3 award. So no, you don't really need anything cutesy. We don't need Disney animals and bunny rabbits and things bouncing about. I know it's quite tempting and that maybe you like to do that. And not too many like daisies and flowers and hearts and things. I'd rather it to be, try and keep it nice and professional. Remember, put it to your audience, and the audience is, passing an assignment. It's not, doing something for your friends and that. Use very good quality images. Check it all through to make sure that you may well have cut and pasted an image like here. Make sure it's not blurry, it's clear. If you've used a data graph, check it afterwards, make sure it doesn't take up too much of the screen, which is why you need to run it back in slideshow to see it larger. You might find that it's gone too big and it's fallen off your slide. So just check those sorts of things. You can make things bigger and smaller, but it's up to you to check things properly. Okay, if you use builds where every time you click a mouse a line of text comes in, that's okay, but don't overdo it. It can slow down your presentation, and it can, if you do a lot of it, people sort of lose patience a bit with it. I do a bit now and then when I want you to stop and think about things, but I wouldn't do it for every line that I used. Otherwise, you'd probably fall asleep in the middle of it. You might do that anyway, but okay, limit the number of slides. If you try to get 30 slides in 15 minutes, you'll be going flip, 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 flip to make sure, and you'll run out of time. A good rule of thumb is 1 slide per minute. I'm only giving you 5 minutes. You can use a little bit more than that, but I wouldn't go more than about 2 slides per minute, to be completely honest. Which, that's 10 slides really. So between 5 and 10 slides is probably good enough for this piece of work. Okay, because it's more about what you say in between that's important to me. So I don't want to focus too much on the slides. The slides are only going to be part of your mark. It's a combined thing. Know how to practice going backwards and forwards within your presentation. Now, if you were doing it in front of a group, somebody might ask you to see the previous screen. I wouldn't do that, obviously. I'm just going to be reading it as feedback, really. So I can move backwards and forwards if I want to. So, but just for the future, you just need to be aware of how to do that and be comfortable doing it. Practice with someone. Once you've done it, maybe get someone to have a look at it. It's not going to be a long watch, is it, really? So ask one of your friends or a colleague or, somebody you work with, or family member, just to say, give me some feedback on that. They don't need to understand the subject. I mean, the idea, actually, if they don't understand the subject, it's better. Because you could say afterwards, did you learn anything? Have you learned anything new from what I've told you? It's more about them commenting on the colours and the graphics and the images that you've used. One of the things that's really important is just do not read your slides. I know I'm doing it here, but it's something I want you to consider. You will get no marks if all you do is do some PowerPoints and your little face in the corner is just reading those slides out again. Okay? You need to give me interesting information in between the points. You need to give me examples. You need to expand on the little bullet points that you may have made. Now, if you were doing this on a face-to-face in front of a group, the other thing I would say is don't speak to your slides. You'd be surprised the amount of people who maybe aren't very confident, who actually are standing up in front of an audience, and instead of actually looking directly at the audience, and the slides might be going on here, they actually turn around and they read their slides. So this is what you get. Nobody wants to see the back of someone's head, even if they've got a really lovely hairstyle. Really, we don't want to see that. Okay. You shouldn't do that because you're talking to your slideshow here. So hopefully that won't be a problem for you. After you've done the presentation, especially if it's early days and you're not very experienced, hold a presentation review. Think about how can I improve it? How can I do it better next time? Get some feedback. So, I mean, you'll get feedback from me, I can promise you, because you'll get a mark and probably a comment from it. But also, you know, give it to someone that as I said, to have a look at, and they can give you some feedback too. Use what they've said to you, act on it, make changes, and let it help you for the future as well. Okay, so just drawing your attention to the assignment task. It will be in task 2. It is criteria 2.2, as I said to you earlier, and it's produce and deliver an oral presentation, but we want you to use a PPT to back you up, to give you a bit of confidence, and deliver to an audience at an appropriate level. Now, I am the audience, so you're sort of getting a little bit of a get out clause here, really. And remember, it's a level 3, so it's level 3 information. So you need to deliver it in the language of level 3 as well, in the same way that you write your essays. You need to have the same piece of research. If you bring me in some bits of research, it wouldn't hurt to do a little slide with some of your references on it. It's always useful because I could go look back at them and you could probably get some extra marks for that. Okay. What I will say is you can start work on this pretty much as soon as you can. I'll give you the topics in a moment. And you can choose any out of the topics. What you're going to do is you're going to save it as a PowerPoint. You're going to upload it in the usual way to Google Classroom when you upload the rest of your assignment. Okay, you'll upload it as a separate file, obviously, because it's PowerPoint. But you must also send it to me on my email account, which you will find on Google Classroom, your tutor's email account. It's my Gmail account. You'll send it to me on my Gmail. The reason is because you've probably noticed in Google Classroom, when you open a PowerPoint in Google Classroom, you just see the slides. So I won't be able to, if I'm just working with the Google Classroom version, I won't be able to, I'll see the picture in the corner, but I won't hear what you've recorded. Okay. So if you send it to me on Gmail, I can actually run it as a slideshow because I can't run it as a slideshow on Google Classroom. I can watch it as a slideshow and then I can stop it and go back and blah, 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 do what I did and mark it properly. Okay. So without getting it on Google Classroom, I won't be able to mark it. So don't forget, as soon as you've uploaded it, you can just send it to me in an email. Okay, this is a prep for the presentation. So your presentation needs to use PowerPoint slides, as I've said. It lasts up to about 5 minutes. Okay. I'll let you go over by a minute or two, but really not much longer than that because it's unfair. And on the next slide, I've got a list of topics. You can choose any one of those, but please choose one. Okay. And they're going to be a choice of illnesses which you have to research. You need to cover these points. Whatever one you choose, you have to say what the illness is, how is it diagnosed, what sort of tests do they diagnose it with, what are the signs and symptoms of the illness, so what do we look for, how do we know it's that, not that. A piece of research, any research, preferably a bit recent or as recent as you can get, any piece of research that you can find about that illness to show that you've looked at it a bit wider. What are the treatment or interventions for that illness? So how do we routinely treat it? And any specific interventions? Is it surgery? Is it chemotherapy? Whatever you've got. How things have changed. If it's an illness that's been around for a long time, such as heart disease, what's changed over the years? Anything you can find out, and that's to do with you reading a bit wider. Okay, looking at the history, say, of heart disease, for example. Obviously, that's moved on. Things have changed there because we can now have heart transplants quite routinely, whereas 40 years ago, actually it's 50 years ago, they've been around quite a long time now. At the beginning, it was just medicine and exercise, and if you survived, you survived, and if you didn't, you didn't. Whereas, heart transplants can give people a whole new lease of life. Other things, COPD, lung transplants. Okay, so what's changed, and are there any future goals? So you might need to look at the World Health Organization for certain illnesses that you're looking at. You might be looking at something where there's some research that they're working really hard on at the moment. You might be able to find that. So like cancer, obviously there's ongoing management for cancer and new drugs being created. How has that changed? What are the future goals? Future goals probably to eradicate it. Is there anything they're working on at the moment? Or are there may be some cancers that they're not doing so well with, but there may be some that they have done very well with. So what's the future goal? You can, depending on which subject you matter. If you've got something like HIV, it used to be a death sentence in the 80s, and all they could do was sort of treat the symptoms until somebody died. Now, with all the retrovirals that they have, they can actually bring someone's viral load down to a point where actually the illness isn't really detectable and doesn't affect their lives. And so that's a whole different medication regime that's changed. And yes, they have to take tablets all the time to keep the viral load down, but it's down to a point where there's hardly any HIV in the bloodstream now. So those sorts of things, before it used to develop into full-blown AIDS with the first set of medication interventions. A lot of people didn't develop into AIDS. They remained HIV positive, but didn't develop into AIDS. And now they are sort of HIV positive, but to such a low level that they couldn't pass it on. So people can actually have children, things like that, as long as it's being well managed. So if you do something like HIV, massive changes there that are really very interesting. Okay, but the choice is yours. You can do anything you like. And here's the list coming up. Okay, we've got diabetes type 1 and 2. Remember now, diabetes is a massive subject, so you need to be quite succinct. You need to show me what the differences are between type 1 and 2, and then just, focus on what are the different types of treatments and that. Coronary heart disease, leptospirosis, motor neuron disease, breast cancer, HIV or AIDS. You can take it from either way. COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, covers a lot of lung diseases. Malaria, autism, chronic depression. I've said chronic because I don't want, just to report if someone gets depressed because their husband's died and that, and then but eventually they go on to recover. That's fine, but that's not really classed as a long-term illness. So, but there are some people who suffer from depression for many years of their lives. So we're looking at something like chronic depression, bipolar disorder, or prostate cancer. I've got a bit of a mix up there for you. So you've got some mental health issues, got different parts of the body. We've got a couple of cancers. We've got some other diseases. We've got some uh, congenital diseases, and we've got something that can be brought on by lifestyle changes. So it's up to you to choose. I really don't mind what you choose. Obviously, if you're unsure and you want to ask some questions about how to approach this, then you know the WhatsApp. So just give me the WhatsApp and I will share the answer to all of you in case other people were thinking of it. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, so that's for 2.2. Again, any questions, give me the WhatsApp. Few little references for you you might want to look at in a wider way about presentations. So you might want to save it in case you ever have to do one. And good luck with your presentation. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk you through the assignment. I've got a few slides really just to cover over the other tasks in the assignment, because there is also another one where you have to do a written report. Just reminding you, follow all the instructions on Google Classroom, meet those word counts. Remember, minus or plus 10%, any more than that, and I'll have to mark you down. Use the covering sheet, hand in by the deadline, and please don't forget your citations and references because you definitely will be marked up and down on those. Okay. Okay, task 1. So task 1 is 400 words. You've got 4 criteria. You can do 100 words each if you want. So we think back to the slide sheets for week 1. Go back to week 1's PPT. Describe the different methods used to communicate in health and social care. So think about the different types of methods that you can use, verbal, non-verbal. Focus on that really, written. Discuss the strengths and weaknesses of both formal and informal communication methods. Remember, go back to think about the formal stuff that comes down from above. Think of strengths and weaknesses though, written policies, chatting over a cup of tea. Think of the strengths and weaknesses of those. We did touch on it a little bit, but see what you can come up with as well. Outline the principles of effective communication. That's all in the first slide as well. What sort of things are effective. Think again, verbal, non-verbal, written. Explain the potential barriers. Now, we did a little bit of that about the barriers. You may think that you might want to write more about barriers and how they can be overcome. So maybe a couple of those questions you can probably make a bit smaller to give yourself more words to write on barriers. Remember, barriers, there's quite a few sections: environment, ability, cultural differences, language differences, those sorts of things. But don't forget to answer both parts of that question. You may explain the barriers, but for each one, give me at least one sentence on how you can overcome them. Otherwise, you won't get the full mark for 1.4, okay? It's the same with 1.2. Try to find a strength and weakness. If you only give me strengths, then I can't give you a full mark for that. Okay. So that's task 1, 400 words. As I said, break it up as you wish. Personally, I might put a bit more detail into 1.4 and a bit less into a couple of the others, but it's up to you. Task 2, we've talked a bit about some bits of task 2. 2.1, you need to write into the assignment that's discuss different methods of oral and written communication found commonly in health and social care. So you've got oral communication, written communication. I did you a slide that tells you all the different types of communication in health and social care. So you're going to pick a few out of there and write a couple of sentences. Okay. Don't just give me a list. That's okay, but it says here discuss. Okay. So say a little bit about them. Give me a bit of a more of a description. Okay. So don't just give me a list, text in, office diary, handover notes, care plans. Don't just give me that bullet point list, but just say a little bit. 2.2 is your oral presentation. It's not included in the word count because it is your PPT, separate your PowerPoint. So the word count really only covers 2.1 and 2.3. Remember the oral presentation, do it on a PowerPoint, do a voiceover recording. You might want to play with the recording first before you start using it. Try it out a couple of times and then over record it, just so as you get used to pause, stop, and replay. That's all. That needs to come up. That needs to come in as a separate file, the PowerPoint. Okay. And you need to send it to me on my Gmail. My Gmail you'll find on Google Classroom if you don't already have it. Okay. Now, last bit is 2.3, which is included in the 300 word count. So 2.1 and 2.3 are in the 300 word count. Produce a written communication that is appropriate for your organizational role. Okay, and if you go back to week 2, I have addressed this there. You have 4 case studies. Okay, you can choose one of those, and they are really to give you a bit of background on the person you are writing on. So you need to make a note here. Okay, the written communication I want you to write is as if you were doing a sort of end of shift report on your service user. So you were writing in your service users notes. So you need to go back to the slides on recording just to remind yourselves on the do's and don'ts of recording. Think about the language that you're going to write. You're only going to need to write about a paragraph, about 200 words. Okay. The reason I gave you some case studies was it was really just to give you something to focus on rather than to create the whole thing yourself. So you can take any one of the 4 people in the case study, go back to week 2, you'll see it there, and choose one of them and use them as a basis. So you're going to write the report as if you were the key worker who worked with that person. So think about your language, think about what you're saying. So you might have done a morning shift with them, got up, helped them get dressed, helped them have their breakfast, etc., etc. Or it might be an evening shift. You might have gone to an activity group with them, or it might be, towards the end of the day where you have your evening meal and get them ready for bed. Try to, best to focus on a daytime shift, morning or afternoon, really. So you've got a few hours to write up on. So, but just think about how you report things. What did Mrs. Jones say to you? Is there anything Mrs. Jones complained of? What did you have to do to, make it right? Just be very professional about your language. Remember, it's an oral presentation for the appropriate level. The appropriate level in this case is you writing as a care worker in your care home so that the rest of the team will see what's happened in the day. So that's the appropriate level that you're writing for. Okay. Again, if anybody is really unsure, WhatsApp me and I will share that one. Okay. That's 2.3, a written communication. But in this case, you just put it in as a paragraph as 2.3 and head it up, as if it was, like case record for Mrs. Jones, something like that. And then sign and date it. Well, just put your name and date it as if you were doing it as a proper case record, okay? Because I'll give you extra marks for sort of laying it out nicely. So if you put the date on it and if you put your signature on it, that's good. And if you give it a decent heading, like Mrs. Jones, Monday the so and so case record, whatever you want to call it, okay? So, but that's what you're doing. You're doing a case record review of the end of a shift. Okay. As I said, if you're not sure, WhatsApp me. Okay, task 3 is the final task. It's really looking at the slides we did last week. Understand the importance of ICT in communication. You've got 300 words, you've got 3 criteria. And remember, it's discuss, discuss, explain. So I don't need lists. You need to say a little bit. You need to say a few sentences about each. Discuss the benefits and potential hazards of using technology in communication for organizations. And the second one is about doing the same thing for service users. So do not get mixed up. In the first one, what's the benefit and potential hazards for the organization? So for the care home that you work on or the people who own it or run it, what are the eventual and potential hazards of using technology? You may say there's lots of benefits and hardly any hazards, fine, but there might be like data protection, things like that. And then the benefits and potential hazards for service users, such as all the care records being in one place, not having to repeat themselves to lots of different people over and over again. Okay, you get it. Potential hazards, people sharing it when they shouldn't, emails being sent to the wrong person or something. So the wrong, their family get information they didn't want to have or something like that. So, be a bit creative with this. You've got 300 words. 3.3 is explain the issues around data protection. So think about some of the main points of data protection. What issues are there, or what things are there to remember about data protection? What things do we have to do? And how is it implemented? I did actually give you an additional worksheet, an additional reading sheet for you to look at about DP and some of the issues for the recent update of data protection. So you can use that as a guide and pick some ideas out of there. How is it implemented? So just give me a couple of sentences. How do we put data protection? How do we implement it in health and social care? Focus on your care home if you want. Remind us that it has to be a written data protection policy. Remind us that staff need to be trained, things like that. Or someone has to have a responsibility for overseeing information, which can often be the home manager, or it could be a designated senior or something like that. Okay, 300 words, probably manage for 100 each. Again, the first 2 you could go down on, maybe say a little bit more on data protection. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the tasks. The usual thing. If you need to speak to me, just WhatsApp me. Okay, if you want to check out anything, and do please check out with me if you're really unsure. Check it out rather than do the wrong thing. This one, task 3, make sure you get 3.1 and 3.2. You don't mix it up. First one, you're only talking about benefits for the organization. Second one, you're only talking about benefits of service users. So don't run information about the organization. Separate it out nice and clearly. A lot of people end up writing about both, and you're wasting words then. Okay? Okay, I will leave you to it, and that is the end of Level 3 302 Communication. So congratulations for coming to the end of the unit. And good luck with the assignment, everybody. Bye bye.